realizing it wasn't
And
fun.
the parents did not think it was fun.
No, no.
I cannot imagine, I have a friend that has 3 kids, 3 different grades, and she was having to home, do the homeschool for all 3. I cannot imagine trying to do 3 different lessons and every day. Oh, that's Bill Helen, that's the other.
Wonderful. We have a very good Spanish speaking congregation also.
Yeah, we met him last night. He's the one that helped me figure out why my water was working.
He has been a huge asset, along with our English speaking course, so he's been a major part of our Spanish speaking congregation. Yeah, he's really good about the parking place. Yeah, and he's when they got the call and say, hey, you're Fairmount Park.
Transmissions on, and go in reverse.
Really?
Well, there was enough room, either end, so.
Okay, well, I'm
The
so
van
glad.
was the problem, and I couldn't pull.
I'm so glad you guys were able to plug in and everything. But good morning.
Good morning.
Got some coffee and donuts in the back. You guys are feeling it. I hope you all have a wonderful evening and stay warm enough out there.
We did.
Good.
We've got, mine. We've got, Peter's, we run our, and the propane gas. That's how it takes it show up in the morning.
Yes, it does.
And then, years ago, we did have electric heating pad. I love it, because he way up for golf, but I can find one.
Well, when we're together, we all have the RV, my parents had an RV, we were traveling and doing a lot of stuff. It's running all about what we do. We travel our whole place over the high school.
We lived so I'm not hired on.
Wow.
Sometimes I'm ready for a house,
Yes, yes.
We've been able to travel more. But I just work on
And what? Oh, yeah? Well, I know you did a great, somebody did a great job on the floor, so. Oh, good.
So far, there's nobody on the Zoom, so.
I was telling him, they're trying to make my daughter's school go back to in-person school. And she was at the school board for the exemption.
Colorado was there on the line.
Oh, good.
Hey, I don't know.
She's school. And they were supposed to go back Monday in person school. And she's like, I can't do it. So I'll be my vaccine. Once I get my vaccine.
You headed down to Florida?
Yeah.
Central Florida. Running in.
We closed them outdoors. Actually, there's 2 of them. One will be at Central Florida Bible Camp and one will be at Mount Dora. But we all stay at Central Florida Bible Camp over on these
Not too long ago.
Did you take a walk on the leap of faith?
No. We were, just meeting with some folks, I had an uncle of mine that passed away and was generous enough to leave a lot to the children's home out there. So, it was, just going out there and meeting all those folks. Just a great place.
Hello. Somebody dropped off and you came back.
I did because you couldn't hear me.
Oh, well, all it said on my end was to ask you to unmute, so I was just waiting for you to unmute.
No, I did, I unmuted, but you couldn't hear me.
Oh.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I did unmute.
You tell them I said hello.
I started all of
Okay.
them. Hey, did you find it? Did you
Oh,
find it?
I forgot to even look for it.
Okay.
Of course.
Yeah, sorry.
Are you gonna take care of the contribution today?
Yes,
Would you look and see if they checked on the wireless back there?
Will do.
Phone number.
yes.
They haven't gotten back yet.
Well, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
What we have here, I think this is that.
Number one,
Yeah.
I'll have to look at the check. I think it's 609 or something.
Hello, Ed. Hello. How you doing? I'm pretty well. Just probably sound like I have a cold, but I feel fine.
You get rid of that power?
No.
No one else is parking.
Keeping it under control.
Yeah. It'll probably hang on for a while.
Yeah.
How's Debbie doing?
She's doing pretty well. She's getting a million old in school tomorrow.
Okay, good.
And, she's got a sense of taste and smell.
Oh, that's real good. Is it snowing there?
I don't think so. It's very cold.
Okay.
But I don't think they got any snow.
Hey, Ed. Hey, how y'all doing? It's not a cold point, but we're doing.
I wish you could.
It was wonderful.
I think my thermometer must be.
Just perfect out there, weather, and then it's a watch.
I think it is very hot.
And, the winter seems to swell, the rain just the wave, really, yeah, just monsters just crashing and sucking everything out. So it's just, well, there was, so, outside, reading on the outside, those big, yes.
Okay, any announcements for us?
Yeah, I'd like you to.
Farm still looking for that?
You probably will afterward when you does the contribution.
So our caller after church.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like my ex-wife, Susan O'Brien, put on the prayer list.
Okay.
Her mom died, just a few days ago,
Okay.
and, I was really glad to see her over Christmas.
Okay.
Yes, you got it. You got it.
How you doing?
Good. Good. How about you?
Oh, you ain't too Sunday, nobody here.
You don't get the messages.
I ain't no message. I called, Linda, she told me, no. No service today. I called
You've been on church.
Contribution, we're gonna write one every month.
Okay, any other announcements or request before, Forest leases and singing? And then we'll have our lesson and then.
We have a friend like Miss Mars that has COVID, that only, she probably only lives a few more days. She's in a nursing home.
What's her name?
Why don't we just call her Miss Mars? Mars the doctor, that is her name, but we call her Miss Mars.
Okay. All right.
What is your next step?
I think the fourth Sunday, whatever that is. Is what we're looking at. Any other announcements for everyone else? Welcome to our visitors.
Yeah, like I said, I
Be
mean,
rude to,
give praise to the fellow visitors that traveled long and far, who come to be a part of our humble service this morning.
With the Texas,
Very well.
Marshall and
Okay.
And Angela.
Okay, yeah, years ago, I had a friend that was, came from the Johnson Street Church in San Angelo. Yeah, you know Rick Graham? He's not living there, but his family was, he grew up there, he was youth minister for a while. And I have a brother who was in Austin.
My daughter lives in Round Rock.
Okay, my mother, lived out there in Georgetown, so I know that area fairly well. Okay, well, we'll have prayer and have a couple of songs of our lesson and communion after the lessons. So if those of you online, mute yourselves. And hopefully it won't crash on us. Is it is probably good sometimes? Okay, let's go down here as we begin. Thank you, Lord, for this time to be here. Thank you for our technology to allow us to be able to include others who can't be here physically with us. And we want to lift up these names that have been mentioned. We want to pray for Miss Marge and that you can comfort her and help her through these days. And pray for Jim and his family and for Susan and the loss of her mother. Just pray to comfort them and keep your hands on them. And we pray for our soldier nurses and safety now to the 5 camp and just pray that they'll be able to do the work down there and help them other things won't get in the way. And we just pray to help us to be the light we need to be here, help us to bring your word of hope and love to those around us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Okay, everybody, good morning. It's great to be back. It's been several Sundays. I've been traveling as well, except I went to Hawaii over the winter breaks, spent some time with some family. Was able to navigate, jump through all the proper hoops and regulations and get the proper tests. But it was great to be away in a tropical island and almost coming back was the hard part. It certainly was, but it's good to be back. Excited for a new year, excited to be here. Excited about all the changes. Let's go ahead and sing Trust and Obey, a nice standard. Hopefully I'll be able to remember how to sing all of these. Trust and Obey, 702 in our books. We're just going to sing the first, second, and fifth verse. I didn't bring my glasses, so I might make up some words. 702, we'll see the first, second, and fifth. When we walk with the Lord in the light of His word, what a glory He sheds on our way. While we do His good will, He abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to
trust and obey. Not a shadow can rise, not a cloud in the skies, but its smoke quickly drives it away. Not a doubt nor a fear, not a sorrow nor a tear, can abide while we trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. In fellowship sweet, we will stay at His feet, or we'll walk by His side in the way. What He says we will do, where He says we will go. Never fear, only trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and sing Love Lifted Me, page 345. We'll go ahead and sing all three verses. I always think of this as like a sailor's tune for some reason, you know, an old sea shanty to some degree. All right, sorry. I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, buried deeply, stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despair and cry. From the waters lifted me, now safe and alive. Love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. All my heart to Him I give, ever to Him I cling. In His blessed presence will ever His praises sing. Love so mighty and so true, merits my soul's best songs. Faithful, loving service to Him belong. Love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. Golden angels look above, Jesus completely saved. He will lift you by His love out of the angry waves. He's the master of the sea, billows His will obey.
He a Savior wants to be saved today. Love lifted, love lifted, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. All right, thank you guys very much. That was beautiful this morning.
You want to mark a song for communion?
Yeah, let's go ahead. We're going to sing Have Thine Own Way
Okay.
at the closing of our service to our sermon to prepare our hearts for the Lord's Supper.
Okay. All right.
Have Thine Own Way.
What page?
169.
Go ahead and mark that. Everybody remember this show? I think most of us are, dare I say it, old enough to remember it. From the first time around, before reruns. And y'all remember how it began with Peter Graves, Jim Phelps, Parker. He's a janitor in a building and goes into his supply closet, and there's this little manila envelope with a little tape recorder in it. And he would open it up and it would say, "Good morning, Mr. Phelps." And then would give him some brief summary of a situation. And then at the end say, "Your mission, should you decide to accept it," and then tell him what his mission is. And I actually just saw a special about this series and all these exotic locations they went to. And it turns out they never left LA County. Every one of those exotic countries they were in was on a back lot somewhere there right in Los Angeles. So kind of, I know, kills the mystique of the show, but and that's a little bit what I want to talk about today, because in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be headed up to Tennessee to join Debbie and Amelia up there. Amelia's getting enrolled in school tomorrow, so we can kind of help out with Debbie's parents who are having a lot of health issues. Her dad's with cancer and everything. So that's what we're going to be doing. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. Your mission, should you decide to accept it, over the coming weeks. Here as we're heading into the future, heading into the new year. And the outline there that you've got will go along with the PowerPoint, and you can fill it in from the blanks, fill in the blanks from the PowerPoint on the screen behind me. Now, let's look at this. Acts chapter 2, verse 47 is one of our passages where they were praising God, having favor with all people, and the Lord added daily to the church such as should be saved. Notice you can't join the church. The Lord adds you to the church at a point after you have obeyed the gospel and been baptized into Christ. You can join the Rotary Club or the Kiwanis Club or a denomination, but the Lord adds people to the church. And we have to understand that's not being anything dogmatic, but that's just basic fundamentals. And as Christians, the mission now is going to be to go to some of these fundamentals. COVID has made things difficult, let's face it, but it's not impossible for us to be able to take the gospel to people and to be able to add to the church. I'm seeing on social media that there are still a lot of places where they're still evangelizing, they're still baptizing, they're taking all the appropriate precautions, but they're still able to do it. So I want us to look at our mission. Our mission primarily is to share Jesus. Is just to tell Jesus. You don't have to be a formal preacher standing in the pulpit every Sunday to do it. You can do it anytime, anywhere that you've got an audience. If you've got someone around you who is not a Christian, you got a mission field right there. And here for the Central Church, sharing Jesus with people here in our community is going to be the mission. That's what you're going to have to carry on after I've left, and Henry for however long he's here. Who knows if you'll get somebody else, but Henry has got here, and I think 2 or 3 other churches that he's looking after. So he's going to need help. He's going to need everybody to participate and help him out, because the Great Commission, remember, is for everybody. All authority has been given to Jesus in heaven and on earth. Now, notice he said all authority has been given to him. He didn't just say some of the authority is given to him, but all authority is given to him. And Jesus, we've got to, if we really believe he is the only way that people can find salvation, then we've got to make sure we see that as an urgency to share it. heard of and I can't remember his name, but it was an agnostic who once said that if I really believed that Jesus was the only way, I would talk about nothing else. And yet, as Christians, how many of us talk about football? We talk about politics, talk about the weather, talk about this, that, and the third. But we don't always talk about Jesus when we need to. And so the mission is going to be telling people and teaching people about Jesus right here in your community or wherever it is that you go. Whether you Tallahassee, Thomasville, Jefferson County, wherever you go. That's really what it means when he said go into all the world. It's as you go into all the world. There's an old legend that tells of how Jesus is having a conversation with the angel Gabriel in heaven and tells him that he's got some fishermen, he's got his former tax collectors, got all these people to spread the gospel. And Gabriel says, well, what's the backup plan if that doesn't work? And Jesus said, there is no backup plan. That's the plan. It's for us to take the gospel to everybody. And it's not just to rely on a so-called clergy class or anything like that. Technology is great. Having Zoom, having Facebook, YouTube, and all these other social medias to spread it is great, but we still need that human contact, human touch for people. Carrying out the mission means that we've got to convince people in our lives of their need for Jesus. And looking at some of the literature that's come out lately, you're looking at what a lot of denominations are doing. It's getting a little difficult because a lot of these places that you go to and they've got whatever church on their sign, and then they're turning around and saying, but Jesus really isn't the only way. There's all sorts of ways you can get there. That's not a very good selling point. You've got to believe in it. When I sold insurance, I had to really believe in the product that I was selling in order to convince people to buy it. And it was for a company that I actually had to use the services a time or two before I sold it. So I could do it and I could be convincing and believe in it because I had good customer service from them. And that's the same thing as Christians. We have got to tell people, we have got to be convinced in our own mind that Jesus is what people need here in the 21st century. And we've got to put forth the effort to find them. There are interested people out there. I'm convinced of that. I do believe that people are still searching spiritually. It's a dark world. Sometimes we just got to dig a little bit deeper, work a little bit harder. Because so many people right now are not being raised in a Christian home. I grew up in a neighborhood where there were more people that did not go to church than did. And most of my friends growing up, the majority did not go to church anywhere. And now they're parents and grandparents now and probably didn't go to church, didn't take their kids. So you've got 2 or 3 generations there of people who have not gone to any kind of church assembly regularly. So to them, Jesus is just somebody they hear about at Christmas and Easter. And so we've got to tell them that there's more to it than that. So fulfilling the mission, should you decide to accept it before the tape self-destructs. Let me share with you some traits here that we are going to need. Because number one, we've got to have some sincerity. You know, people are going to know if you're a phony, if you're really interested in them or if you're not, if you are really living a Christian life and you're not. Now remember, I always have to stop here and define our terms. When I'm talking about sincerity, when I'm talking about Christian love or anything like that, I'm talking as defined in Scripture, not defined by the latest Gallup poll or the latest Fox News poll. I'm not talking about what people on social media are saying. I'm not saying what a political party said. What does the Bible say? Because if you notice, the way the world defines love, the way the world defines Christianity, it's a completely different ballgame than what we see in the Scriptures. It's not the same. So we got to go through the Scriptures to define our terms. And notice here, Romans 12:9 says, let love be without hypocrisy, abhor what is evil, cling to what is good. 1 Peter 2:1 says to lay aside all hypocrisy. So they've got to notice it and see the sincerity that we have. And this word, our English word sincere, comes from a Latin word that means without wax. And so if you were in the marketplace and you were looking at some kind of pottery or, earthen clay, and you're thinking about buying it, sometimes they got chipped while they were bringing it from the house or from their shop to the marketplace. So they would put a little bit of wax on it to hide, fill it in, to hide the cracks and the damage. And of course, let the buyer beware. Buyers would look at it, hold it up to the sun, expose it to heat. The wax would melt. And so for a merchant to give you, the buyer, assurance that the pottery that he was selling was good and didn't have any cracks, he would mark it as sincerus, without wax. And that became our English word sincere and sincerity. It means that there is nothing covering it up. There is no filter. That's what our sincere faith has to be. There's nothing covering it up. There is no filter over it. And then remember, what people need to see in us as Christians is that we are sincere about our faith. There's nothing covering it up. There's nothing phony about it. And sure, there are going to be times we slip. We all know that. Doesn't mean you're a hypocrite because you slip, because maybe you let an expletive slip once in a while. That's not hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is something completely different. But we've got to have that singleness of heart that Acts chapter 2, verse 46 talks about, that the early Christians had, that gladness, that joy they had, and happiness when they were together, when they went out into the world to share the gospel, when they went out to tell people about Jesus. They had a sincerity about it. They were satisfied with what they had. They were a thankful people. And then we have to remember, too, that there is nothing that will turn people off more than a phony Christian. Think about that for just a second. That's what a hypocrite is, isn't it? Hypocrite's an actor, someone who knows they're playing a role. We were involved in the Opera House here and played some roles in some stage productions. And there was one time I had to play a crooked lawyer. Yeah, I know that's a redundancy. But, I did not behave in real life the way that lawyer did. It was just an actor, a role I was playing on stage, and I knew it. Got up on stage, did my lines, and then walked off and was who I am after I got up. There's a story that came out of a Reader's Digest about a woman who traveled 50 miles to visit a friend. And then she went out to get in the car to leave after her visit and realized that the keys were sitting there and the door was locked. So she called, this is before cell phones. So she called her husband and he said, all right, just wait right there. I'll get my keys and bring them out to you. And then she went back out to the car and started poking around and realized that the back door was unlocked. Ran inside to call her husband to tell him not to come, but he'd already left the house. So her friend said, well, he's going to be mad when he gets here. So what are you going to do? And she said, well, I'll do what any red-blooded American wife would do. She went out, opened the back door, locked it, and closed it. So see, it's hard sometimes to not want to cover up our imperfections, isn't it? We like to cover them up. Politicians like to cover them up. We don't like our bad side or our weaknesses to be seen. We want to try and cover them up. But when it comes to our faith, it needs to be sincere. People need to see that we are just as real as they are, that we have the same struggles that they have, and that requires a passionate conviction. Notice here, Jeremiah, his word is in my heart as a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary of holding it in. Indeed, I cannot. Acts 17, while Paul waited for Timothy and Silas at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him when he saw that the city was given over to idols. And you notice, Paul didn't just sit there and say, well, they've got all these altars and these temples to various gods. They're just going to find their own way. It's all right. It's all good that they can just find their own way. What did he do? Because remember that the Athenians just sat there just waiting for something new to come along. They were always looking for the next big thing, like Vince Gill's song from several years ago. And so Paul used that as an opportunity. I had a friend who got to do that in Prague one time when he was over there, that there was a crowd of people, and he used the buildings and the architecture very much like Paul did here in Athens to present the gospel to people because of his conviction that Jesus is what they needed, that Jesus is the only path that they're going to find to God. And they've got to go through him. And that's why he wanted them to understand that. And that's why he preached it. Another account that I read about here of a preacher in the Columbus, Ohio area that was driving by an Islamic mosque, and he looks around at the various false religions that were coming into the Cincinnati area. And he said he felt a lot like Paul must have felt in Athens. And he gets very distressed, he said, with various pagan gods and other faiths coming in. And he went on to say that I understand that the purchasing department of a major grocery store has a sign that reads, "Salesman, before you sell your product, be so convinced of its superiority that when you're finished, people will be more anxious to buy it than you are to sell it." How are you with your Christianity? Are you as sincere with it that anyone that you're talking to is going to be more anxious to know about Jesus than you are to tell them? That's what we all need to be. That's the level of enthusiasm that we all need to have. I know it's not always politically correct anymore, but I don't see Jesus worrying about politically correct or hurting people's feelings. Sometimes it would happen. But look at here again in Jeremiah. If I say I'll never mention the Lord or speak in his name, his word burns in my heart like a fire. It's like a fire in my bones. I'm a worm out trying to hold it in. All right, I am worn out rather trying to hold it in. I can't do it. And then Jeremiah is the kind of conviction needed to motivate us to share the gospel of Jesus. It's the excitement. You know, when a kid comes home, when my daughter got straight A's and she came home, do you think she was very quiet about it? Oh no, she was all excited about it. She wanted to call my brother. My brother told her he would give her $1 for every A she got. So she wanted to call Uncle Misha and tell him that she got all A's. So I dialed it and I put it on speaker. He answered the phone. She says, "You owe me some money, dude." She was excited about it. That's the kind of excitement we need when we are telling people about Jesus. We've got to have that kind of excitement. They have to see that our enthusiasm for Jesus. Enthusiasm goes a long way. When I was employment specialist down at the high school, that was one thing I drove into the kids when they're on the job. Enthusiasm and a good attitude will go a long way on the job. You might not be the best salesman, you might not be the best worker, but if they see you've got attitude, a good attitude, and you've got enthusiasm, it's going to go a long way towards helping you keep the job whenever there's problems, whenever there's cutbacks or something like that. They might be a good worker, but if he's got an attitude problem, I can just about guarantee he's not going to last very long. And I saw that in my work experience. To complete the mission, we need a spiritual reliance. In other words, human effort isn't going to do it all. We got to rely on the power that the Lord gives us. We got to rely, as we saw them doing in the book of Acts, relying on God, praying to God for power, praying to God for wisdom, praying to God for what they needed. Even back in the Old Testament, when Nehemiah was getting ready to go up to the king, you notice between the time the king called him forward and the time he got there, he said he sent up a prayer to heaven. Now, I don't know how far that was, but it wasn't very far, probably just a couple of feet before he got there. But you can pray anytime, and you can stay in that prayerful mindset that we all need to keep. And so when you are pursuing a mindset that way, ask yourself some questions. Number one, do you believe that only Jesus can change a person and save their soul? If you really believe that, then that should be what we're talking about. That should be our primary emphasis of conversation. Should be that. And then are you praying for any person in particular? Anybody, friend, relative, your neighbor, that you can be praying about? That they be restored, or that they come to Christ, that they make that decision to be baptized into Christ, or you can get a study with them. Maybe you won't actually do the baptizing, but maybe you'll get some seeds planted that somewhere down the road someone will do it. And do you know it is our duty to pray for those people to come to Christ, those who are outside of Christ, and be praying for them, whether they're our neighbors, world leaders, whoever. Make sure that we are praying for people to come to Christ. And then do you understand it is our mission to influence the lost, to be a Christian influence on the lost? Think about this. When my kid goes to school, there's going to be all sorts of influences that are trying to influence her away from Christ, from her peers to the science class to you name it. There'll be people there trying to steer her away from Christ. So I need to be that influence to steer her towards Jesus. There's all these influences telling people how Jesus is just another philosopher among philosophers, that he's a myth, that he really didn't exist, and whatever else they're telling them. We got our work cut out for us. We need to be telling people the biblical truth about Jesus. Several years ago, about 25 years ago, I think it was, Billy Graham held a crusade in Cincinnati, Ohio at Paul Brown Stadium, where at the time the Cincinnati Bengals played. I think they still play there, but I'm not sure. Stadium holds about 60,000 people. Now, setting aside the denominational error that he likes to teach, the people organizing the event went through the stadium and they prayed over every single seat, 60,000 seats. That's, I think, about a third the population of Tallahassee, maybe half. So just think about that. If it's something holding that size, that many people. They prayed over every seat for the person that's going to be sitting here, that person would, as they would put it, accept Christ. And they didn't know any of those people. They were complete strangers, but they were still praying for them. Total strangers. So who are you going to be praying for in 2021 to come to Jesus? That's part of your mission. That's part of the job as Christians, to have that appeal to urgency. Because a lot of times we do get a little too passive about our faith. Have you noticed that people who are anti-Christianity, they're not at all passive. They are not at all soft about preaching against Jesus and saying what a fairy tale Christianity is and all that. They're pretty bold about it. And they're going to get bolder with this incoming administration. I don't have any doubt about that. But we've got to pick up our game and be as bold as they are. Notice 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20, that we implore you. What does that mean? It's urgent. We implore, we urge you, we are begging you, we are telling you. And, I don't know what the statistics are. I've seen statistics as high as 90% of Christians who would say, I've never led anybody to Jesus. Now just think if we could flip that somehow and have 90% of the Christians lead at least one person to Jesus. So let's see the urgency about our souls. That's our mission. Just like this fire crew going to put out a fire. If your house is on fire, do you want the fire crew to be pretty lax about it and stopping for coffee or to get donuts or doing something like that while they're going to your house? Or do you want them to get there and put the fire out? I'd rather they got there and put the fire out myself. So let's bear that in mind. There is an urgency. So your mission, should you decide to accept it, regardless of who is presenting the Sunday lesson, share Jesus with our community. So as we go into communion, Forrest, do you...
Yeah, we're going to sing Have Thine Own Way, page 169. We'll sing all three verses. Have thine own way.